Let's bring in former CIA director and retired four-star General David Petraeus. General Petraeus, first of all, let's pick up what we just heard there. The idea that giving any concessions as part of negotiations with Russia would be rewarding basically their terrorism that they've rained down upon the Ukrainian people.
Yeah, I mean, it indicates that the Venn diagrams, if you will, what's acceptable, in other words, to President Putin and also to President Zelensky, there's still very little overlap, if any. Basically, what you have is a president in Moscow who's watching his economy, his financial system, his inner circle, and his business community be seriously damaged, in some cases irreparably so. And then, of course, another president in Kyiv who's watching his country slowly be damaged, parts of it destroyed, terrible loss of innocent life as well as of his forces. Although the battlefield situation is a bit of a bloody stalemate, the Ukrainians actually having halted the Russians around Kyiv, Kharkiv, and some others, and even pushing them back a bit in Kyiv. But then you have the situation in Mariupol, which has become a bit of a Ukrainian Alamo at this point in time. It's fighting to the last defender and pinning down multiple Russian battalions in so doing, very heroically. But ultimately, it looks as if it's going to have to collapse. It's going to be taken. And when it does, that is a moment of some peril for Ukraine, because now that port can be used by the Russians. Remember, they were using a port just to the west of that where a ship was hit and destroyed, Russian ship. They'll now have quite a good port on the Sea of Azov out to the Black Sea. And then it will free up a number of battalions that were the ones that have been closing the circle, closing the noose on Mariupol, who can then push further north and perhaps enable Russia to achieve what it has now said as it's redefined its objectives to taking control of all of the Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts, provinces, if you will, and then solidifying its grip on a land corridor from the Donbass, from those two oblasts all the way to Crimea. So this is going to be a very tenuous period the next few days as we see what happens in Mariupol, what the Russians are able to do as a result of it, and then how the Ukrainians can respond, because it's a very long distance from anywhere where they might have forces that they could possibly spare. And of course, in the meantime, very understandably, you have President Zelensky, who, despite hearing this extraordinary commitment from President Biden and from all the leaders of NATO at the summit this past week, nonetheless wants more. And I fully understand that. I mean, he's like a battlefield commander, and no commander has ever had enough forces, drones, Air Force, whatever it may be. And that's the position in which he finds himself, and we should understand that. And what we need to do is provide everything we can that can be provided without needlessly provoking a direct confrontation with Russia. I very much understand President Biden's concerns about that.
Well, let me ask you about that, because we saw President Biden's speech in Warsaw outline this basically as the struggle, the fight of our time. But there was that line at the end of his speech where he said flatly that Putin must go, that this man must not remain in power. Obviously, that's not the policy, but how does something like that, and made headlines all around the world, how does that complicate the efforts to resolve this situation?
Well, I mean, it reminds us that message discipline has its virtues. That was reportedly very clearly an unscripted moment, in addition, in the emotion of that very emotional moment. And, you know, it will cause some challenges down the road. It will disappear, you know, the headlines will move on to something else within a few days. But in the mind of Putin, who's someone who has, you know, watched and rewatched, you know, old videos of Gaddafi being taken and killed, this kind of thing, it will play on his mind, and it could complicate matters going down the road. Look, I think President Biden would be the first, knowing him, he'd be the first to say, oops, you know, okay, hey guys, okay, well, let's get on with it. And this should not overshadow what was an extraordinarily important and successful trip to Europe, one that the U.S. really led, as it has done so impressively, really, throughout this entire effort, and pulled together, guided, and then ultimately with this speech, it was a very, very strong statement, obviously.
I want to ask you a little flashback here to a statement made by the president of Poland visiting Tbilisi, Georgia, after the Russians invaded Georgia back in 2008. A statement that echoes today. He said at that time, again, this is 2008, today Georgia, tomorrow Ukraine, the day after tomorrow the Baltic states, and later perhaps time will come for my country, Poland. Obviously, you know, Ukraine did come. Is there a concern here that whatever ends up resolving this, if there is a resolution here with the Russians backing down, that rewarding them in any way for this is ultimately a green light for Putin's ultimate plan to rebuild the Russian empire?
Jonathan, I tend to think that this has complicated any ambitions that he might have had very, very considerably. This is going to set back his military for years. It's shown the whole world that it wasn't the wonderfully modernized force that everybody thought it might be. This has been a huge challenge for the Russians. You know, the fact that they've lost 7 generals just because they can't command and control sufficiently, they have to get out of their armored vehicles and go forward to find out why are they stopped again, this kind of thing. So I tend to think that his ambitions are going to be seriously set back by what takes place in Ukraine, noting that this is by no means nearing a conclusion.
All right, General David Petraeus, thank you very much for joining us on This Week.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.